G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. In this video I'd like to point my subscribers and viewers towards a channel that I discovered because a co-subscriber of mine, Refried Bean Dip, pointed out the direction to go in. There's a lady in America, don't know where she lives, name of Steinquist Lynerd, Steinquist with a capital S. Then there's a space, new word, capital Lynerd. Steinquist Lynerd. I don't know whether that's her name just in reverse order, like maybe it's Lynn Steinquist. But yeah, Richard Mann at Refried Bean Dip said that this is a really good channel. Go and have a look. And I went and had a look, and I agree with him. Steinquist Lynerd, yeah, good stuff. I enjoy seeing somebody talk to the camera, or as a fella called Conference Report Fred says, yap to the gadget, and just speak without the filters. So today, Steinquist Lynerd came up on my subscribers' activity scroll on my little mobile phone sitting on the Endangered Species Sanctuary, and I had a look at a video that has to do with stuff I look up, and it's persecution of Christians by the Soviet Russian atheist government. And judging by your comments, Steinquist Lynerd, you must be about the same age as my children, because yeah, I'm pretty sure they would never have been exposed in school to too many stories about how the Christians were persecuted in the wicked evil empire of the Soviet Union. So I'm figuring you must be mid-20s. Whereas when I went to school during the 1970s, we had stuff like A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn was set as part of our English literature course. I don't think we had Gulag Archipelago or Cancer Ward or any of his other books, but we were encouraged to go to the library and borrow the other books. You know, A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, for those who haven't read it, it's the story of a man who was a soldier in the Soviet army. He was captured by the Germans. He was in a German prisoner of war camp for a while. He and a bunch of other Soviet prisoners managed to escape and get back into the Russian army. They then fought until the end of the war, and at the end of the war, instead of going home, they were sent pretty much to the concentration camp, because they'd been outside the Soviet Union and therefore they'd had experience of other regimes. And because of that, Joseph Stalin thought that they were a potential source of discontent to the normal citizens who'd never known anything but what they were told by the propaganda machine. So Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a loyal, patriotic Soviet soldier who was put in a concentration camp because he surrendered when his government said he should have kept fighting till he died. And then after he surrendered, he then fought his way out of captivity and back to his own side and helped fight until the war was won. Then they put him in jail. And after serving his time, he then started writing, and then he managed to get out to the West. And then I don't know whether he won a Nobel Prize for Literature, but he went pretty close. And he detailed what it was like to be inside a Soviet concentration camp during the 1950s and 60s and 70s, maybe early 70s. And when I was in high school, I was at a Catholic boarding school for my sins of being a Presbyterian kid who decided not to go to Sunday school at age 6. Therefore, at age 11, I got sent to a Catholic boarding school. And the Catholics were particularly strong on criticism of communism. Bear in mind, more or less the diametrical opposite of communism is fascism, and the Catholic Church supported Mussolini who invented fascism in Italy in 1928. And then they also were pretty supportive of Hitler and Germany. Also, the Lutheran Church was allowed to continue practicing in Germany. Lutherans and Catholic priests continued conducting services, even though Adolf Hitler pretty much led a godless regime. So anyway, a couple of points, Steinquist Lynerd. There were two occasions during your video where you obviously understood the meaning of the word you were reading, but you'd never heard anybody use it in conversation, therefore you weren't sure on how to pronounce it. And it's a bit like the difference between somebody who's got a university degree by distance education. They know what it all means, but they've had to read it in a book and figure out how to say it, compared to somebody who's got a university degree by going to a red brick Ivy League slate roof university, and they've heard all the fancy pants professors dropping such words in conversation, so they know how to say it, but because they were working three jobs, or they were stoned, or they didn't go to lectures, or something else was happening on the day, they don't actually know what the words mean. So because you're prepared to try and use the words, even though you've never heard them, I reckon you get more kudos, more goodie points on the cosmic scoreboard than somebody who can say them without understanding them. So the first word you had trouble with was bourgeois. Bourgeoise. I think that's it. And if you stick another S on the end, it becomes bourgeoisie. Maybe it's an SE or ISE. But anyway, bourgeois means middle class. It's a bit of a put down style of a comment. It's like, to call somebody bourgeois means to call them fat, smug, complacent, lazy, selfish, greedy, middle class, suburban. That's what bourgeois means. If you're talking about middle class values, bourgeois values. The idea that you should have a flat screen TV in every room of the house, that is a bourgeois value. The idea that you should borrow money to send your children to a private school because public school won't give them the advantages that a private school education will give them when it comes to getting a better job and getting better access to credit later on in life, that is a bourgeois attitude. It's often modified by the French word petit, P-E-T-I-T, which means small. Right? So petit bourgeois means little middle class, right? So the bottom end of the middle class, the wannabes, the people who have got two cars in the driveway and a shiny looking house, but they're going to be paying it off till they reach 80 years old because they don't actually own any of it. That's petit bourgeois. The other word that seemed to trip you up was ecclesiastical. Ecclesiastical, ecclesiastical. It basically means the church bureaucracy. Now, there again, another friggin' French word. Bureaucracy, two sources. Bureau means desk. The crassy means C-R-A-C-Y. It's short. It derives from crat or cratic, which is a ruling style or class. So an autocrat is like an automobile gets its power from within. An autocrat gets their power from within themselves, like a king or an absolute dictator. A bureaucrat gets their power from the desk they sit at. So an ecclesiastical bureaucracy, it's somebody who gets their power to rule because they sit at a desk in the church. What can I say? I got sent to a moderately expensive private boarding school. as a teenager. So I've heard people say these things and they've had a higher education than I have. And like yourself, I've read a lot of books and got my head around the concepts, and I don't mind sharing with other people the tips and the tricks on how to say the words so that when we go to use the concepts, using the correct words, we don't get laughed at for pronouncing them wrong. Because let's face it, the people who've got the Ivy League educations, the ones who went to the red brick universities, they do like to look down their nose on autodidactic individuals. And autodidactic means somebody who's taught themselves. So, yeah, what else can I say? When looking at the persecution of the Christians by both Hitler and Stalin, it's kind of interesting to note that Hitler permitted both the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church to function in Germany because he did not want to disturb, or he didn't want to rock the boat in public terms. In the same way that German propaganda against the Jews sort of went up and down depending on the political needs of the day and the circumstances geopolitically, German government persecution of the churches during the Nazi regime varied at the time. Stalin, Hitler's father was a border guard, an Austrian border guard, very Prussian, very stand up in a neat straight line and march to the toilet when you're 3 years old sort of thing. Stalin's father was a cobbler. Stalin was an only child. Stalin's father was a violent alcoholic. If you look at a picture of Stalin, you'll find that his left arm is about 3 inches shorter than his right arm. That's because for 2 or 3 years, he had parts of his elbow bone, was sticking out through, or parts of his upper arm was sticking out through his elbow from a beating delivered by his father when he was maybe 10 years old. The reason Stalin was able to write such flowery, engaging literary speeches is because he spent a couple of years in a seminary learning to become a Catholic priest before he was kicked out for selfishness and viciousness and conduct unbecoming to the priesthood, and that's when he joined the communist revolutionaries. So yeah, it's kind of funny that there are evangelistic atheists, people ranging from Gary to Thunderfoot, Pothole of 54, other people who like to claim that atheism is somehow scientific, and it's not, or that science is somehow atheistic, and that's not either. But they like to claim that all forms of religion are wicked and evil because the Christians persecuted Galileo and Copernicus, or because the Spanish Inquisition, the what was it? Something like the Commission into the Congregation of the Faith, or words to that effect, used to torture people into admitting that they'd worked for the devil, or the Salem witchcraft trials, when the entire population was suffering from ergotamine poisoning from the mouldy grain that they were grinding into bread. And that's all laid at the feet of all religions. It's really encouraging to see an American raised as a Christian turn away from Christianity, become an atheist, question atheism, and become an agnostic, and start to compare the way the Christians and the atheists persecute each other. Yep, I'm enjoying being subscribed to you, Steinquist Lynerd. Yay team. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.